All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to week 4 in English Comp 2. Today we're talking about the annotated bibliography. We're also talking about integrating sources. And I did say we were going to talk more about citation, so we are going to spend a little bit of time talking about citation today. So this is going to be a multi-part video. Not that it'll be multiple videos, but there's going to be different segments about different parts. So bear that in mind. So let's dive in with our annotated bibliography. And so we will look at the assignment sheet here in just a little bit, but I think one of the things that happens is if you've heard of annotated bibliography, a lot of people immediately get upset. Immediately people don't want to do it. They're like, oh, this is so boring, or there's so much work and it's pointless. And I get that. I really do. But I think part of that is we don't do a good job of explaining why it's relevant. And so really the purpose of an annotated bibliography is to list the sources you intend to use for your research. Now, I definitely understand that there are people that are in some classes, it's like, oh, you need 12 sources. And a lot of you be like, I don't need 12 sources. And yeah, I understand that. I understand that argument. I understand where the faculty or the teacher is coming from. And I understand where you, the student, is coming from. But really, the purpose of an annotated bibliography is to help you develop your paper, develop your research. So it's intended for you to just get the sources you're going to use. And each one is supposed to have a short summary of the source and how you intend to use the source. In other words, it's supposed to act as a quick sheet for all the different sources you're going to look up and do your research for and where you're going to apply it. So, yeah, this is a really helpful tool. And actually, if you do the citation properly, guess what? Copy and paste your annotated bibliography into your final paper and take out all the summaries and the little paragraphs underneath, and you have a finished, proper works cited or not citations, or a reference page. Like, that's the beauty of this. And so the design of an annotated bibliography is meant to be your citation, your summary, and your response or reflection, depending on what is being asked of you. And truly, there are skills that are being tested with this, and that's summary, critical analysis, reflection, formatting, and planning. Let me be the first one to tell you, an annotated bibliography is like your earliest rough draft of your final paper. And if you're thinking, how the heck does that make sense? Because you're finding the sources you're going to be using as your support. So this is a perfect time for you to start developing, oh, this source is going to confirm this idea. This one's going to explain how this works. This one's going to be the support for this. That's the goal. You are planning your final research paper. You're planning what order your paragraphs are going to be in. You're figuring out what important details are coming. That's the point of the annotated bibliography. You are getting started on the final paper. That's what this should be. And so definitely I encourage you to think about that as you're going through the annotated bibliography. And like I said, we will look at the annotated bibliography assignment sheet itself. So I guess our next thing is finding sources. So yeah, we're going to wait a second to talk about this, because we're going to look at the assignment sheet first. All right, so here's the assignment sheet for the annotated bibliography. So, as I already said, the annotated bibliography is a list of sources that you intend to use. And it's going to include complete bibliographical information for each source, your citation, formatted correctly for the discipline in which you are working, with each source item followed by an annotation. An annotated bibliography may also make connections among your sources and the information and arguments contained therein. In other words, it's everything that you need to do the final essay. As I've already stated, you may do MLA or APA documentation, whichever one you plan on using. For your final essay, I suggest you do it here. Please use one or the other style consistently. Don't do both. Pick one. But for our purposes, your annotated bibliography will consist of 10 citations. So you need 10 sources and your 10 annotations with it. There may be a source that you use for your journal entries or for your research proposal. Hear me out. 10 sources. At least 4 of these must be scholarly, and we're going to talk about what scholarly means in this lecture video, okay? But we'll get to that in a second. All of your citations need to contain the following. You need a paragraph of summary. Annotations summarize the source. What are the main arguments? What is the point of the book or article or whatever it is you're talking about? What topics are covered? If someone asked what this thing was about, what would you say? The length of your annotation will determine how detailed your summary is. Highlight the most important ideas. This is the summary portion of your annotation. Okay? So every citation needs the cite, then it needs one paragraph of summary, and then you need one other paragraph, and it can be the following 2 pieces. You can make them a paragraph each, or you can combine them together. That is up to you. But you need to evaluate the source. So after summarizing it, offer a brief critique. Is it useful? How does it compare to other sources? Is the information reliable? Is it biased or objective? What is the goal of the source? Again, highlight the important points. This is the critique part. The final part is the reflect, how you'll use this source. Once you've summarized and critiqued it, you need to ask how it fits into your resource. Was it helpful? How does it help shape your argument? Where are you going to use it? Are you going to be using it as background support, or is it going to be an example? What is that going to look like? Has it changed how you think about your topic? So again, each citation will have 2 paragraphs, one for a summary and one for evaluating and reflecting at least. If you want to break these 2 into separate paragraphs, you can. But these 3 things have to be addressed. You need to summarize your source, you need to evaluate how useful it is, and you need to reflect on how you plan on using it. Evaluating sources module on our course Blackboard page contains some useful advice for creating an annotated bibliography, including a template, format, and MLA style, which is here in this link. Format. Your bibliography should be white, double space, 12-point font, readable, pages numbered, name should be on every pages. If you're using APA, it should be called references. If it's MLA, it should be called works cited. This way you can just copy and paste the whole thing, and it's already mostly done for you. Truly. 25% of the grade for completeness. To what extent do you include the required number of sources? If you give me 10 sources and you give me 10 summaries and annotations, even if they're not well done, you get the completeness. The quality will be its own percentage. To what extent do you demonstrate that you've thoroughly examined and evaluated the sources? Remember, you do the summary, evaluation, and how you're going to use it. You do that, and it's good, 25% of the grade. Quality of documentation. How well do you actually do this, following the MLA APA? Again, we're going to talk a little bit about it today again, so that's 25%. And the mechanics. To what extent do you adhere to standards of correctness in terms of punctuation, capitalization, etc.? The standard rules of grammar. That's 25%. It's pretty straightforward. I also have an example on Blackboard. If you give me just a second, we'll look at that here as well. Okay, so this is a real student example of an annotated bibliography. This is from back in 2018, roughly around the time I was first starting teaching. And so right here, annotated bibliography. They had to write an intro paragraph. You don't have to do this. But notice, we have our first source, Corcoran, Anne. This Land is Our Land. Policy Review, number 63, Winter 93, page 72, EBSCO host, and a link to the source that was used. This is proper MLA. And then, the purpose of this article was to inform the audience of how government regulations are hugely impacting private landowners in a negative way. The author argues against the regulations and is scared that the government will take action to take her land. She lives near the Antietam battlegrounds from the Civil War, and because of certain rules and regulations, there's potential for the government to pay off landowners and take the land. She also talks about an EPA regulation regarding wetlands and the property atop said wetlands. The topics of this source include both government regulations and the EPA. Notice, they covered the important summary pieces. They gave me a quick rundown of what this article was all about. And then our second paragraph. This is one of the best sources I have found throughout my research. This source is both personal experience with federal regulations and feedback against an EPA-administered regulation. The source is reliable because it was published by a credible company and is classified as a scholarly source. I do think there is a small amount of bias, but only because she was affected by the issue personally and may carry those emotions to her argument. The overall goal of the source was to show the ever-growing encroachment of the U.S. government on private landowners. Boom. We have a relevance. We also have a mention of bias. And then this source is helpful because there's a lot of context, information, and examples pertaining to federal regulations. This helps shape my argument by expanding my research. Instead of regulations that just hurt the economic sector and small businesses, regulations also harm the private homeowner sector. I can use this source to help show the regulatory impact on the American people. This source has changed my topic by broadening the spectrum. It opens the door for more research on the effects of regulation on the private sector rather than just businesses. And right here, we have how they're going to apply it. They've already said that it actually changed how they approach it and that they have opened up new avenues for research for their topic. Boom. This is one source of 10 and their annotation. And then we go on to the next one. Gosel, Vivek. Reforming Rules and Regulations, Laws, Institutions, and Implementation. The MIT Press, 2011. And all. Again, we have the citation. We have our summary. We have our evaluation, and we have how we can apply it. This is a standard annotated bibliography. Please note up here, page 4 of 13. Yeah, these are long. It's a long document because you are doing at least 2 to 3 paragraphs underneath every source. So it's going to get long and longer and longer. Don't worry about page numbers. Worry about having 10 sources and 10 annotations. Okay? This is available on Blackboard, all under annotated bibliography under week 4. That being said, let's go back to the actual notes. Okay. So, finding sources. Like I said before, sources can come from many different resources. I want to say various resources, but that feels redundant. No, the idea is that sources don't have to necessarily come from one spot. They can come from really a whole host of anywhere. So like I have written down here, the EC3 library and database, the Erie County Public Library, Google and Google Scholar. And yeah, those are all great places to find information. We also talked about that personal interviews, things like that. Those are all also very legitimate, valid options for sources. For our purposes here, I would say for the annotated bibliography, we should stick to things that we can find, not necessarily interviews that we haven't conducted yet. If you've conducted an interview, reach out to me. We will talk about that specifically. But if not, for right now, note, we're looking for things you can look up. And I want to say very specifically, when looking for sources, use your key terms. This is something that, I don't know, it's not really been taught nearly as much in school as it once was. I know when I was going through school, they taught us this in research classes with using internet. By the way, this was college classes, not high school classes. Not that I'm that old, but yeah, it feels a little weird to say that. But I know some people were being taught this, and it's not really being taught anymore. A lot of people just will Google search an entire question. And I'll tell you right now, looking up an entire question does not usually give you exactly what you're looking for in regards to real research. You need to use key terms. You need to focus on particular words that you want to see show up in sources to find the answer, because sometimes they didn't ask the question the exact way you did, and it has a hard time finding that information. So, in general, use key terms. So, I said academic sources in the assignment sheet. I said, you needed 3 academic sources. And what we know about academic sources are they're knowledgeable sources, they're educated, they're formal, they're boring, and they tend to be smart. But I'm going to tell you right now, that's not all true. Boring is not something that has to be true of academic sources. I actually get to say this with as much excitement as I can. There are academic sources that are videos. There are academic sources that are interactive. There are academic sources that are knowledgeable, educated, and formal, and still smart, but they're not boring. They're things that are exciting to read. And I want to emphasize academic sources tend to be things that are written by an academic, somebody who's in school or works in school, so they're like a professor, things like that. Those tend to be academic sources. But I'm going to let you in on a tiny little secret that's very specific to me, but it's also specific to some higher levels of research. A lot of times, academic sources are only one part of the larger picture. There are professional sources rather than academic sources. And that's something that's written by somebody who is a professional in the field, somebody who has a lot of knowledge that they just don't have the school background to be considered an academic source. And so all of a sudden, some individuals, I'm not saying any here at EC3, but there are some individuals in higher education that will say, well, it's not an academic source, it doesn't count. I will tell you anytime, if you have information from an expert on the field, I count them as an academic source, even if they're not considered academic. Even if they're just a professional source, I would still consider them academic because they work in it, they understand it. So please, hear me when I say, remember how I said you need 4 academic sources? For the most part, you find academic sources on journal databases. But if you can find information from a professional in the direct field that you are researching who has written or talked about stuff, and they maybe wrote about it independently in a blog, or they wrote a book on it, or they published in a magazine that wasn't an academic journal, anything like that, but they are an expert in the field, count that as an academic source, because I will. If that person is considered a serious professional in that field, I would consider it academic source. Okay? So hopefully that makes that 4 academic source requirement a little bit easier. A good example in just broad terms would be if you wanted to write a research essay on, I don't know, the impact that directors have on the vision of a film, and you decided to use personal interviews, or rather televised interviews with movie directors, those aren't academic sources, they're professional sources. But I would argue that I would consider them one of those academic sources that you need to have. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense to you. I count both of them together. So really, academic sources, like I said, are knowledgeable, educated, formal, intelligent, and they're written by people in schools, teachers, field experts, and scientists. And like I said, a professional expert, I would definitely consider to be academic, even if they're not a technical academic thing. But now, I do need to talk about the unicorn source, and I've said this before. I specifically said it in last week's lecture, but I want to emphasize. A unicorn source is the perfect source that has all the information you are looking for, that perfectly agrees with everything you are saying. And I won't deny, it's a nice thing to have. And it's definitely possible, but don't waste your time searching for it. Because unicorn sources are very rare to come by in actual research. A lot of research requires taking tangential information, things that are related to the topic, and applying it in a new way to fit the current topic. A lot of times it's a lot of figuring out how it works, not a one-to-one. So please keep that in mind. Now we transition to using and integrating sources, which is what the essays are about, but we'll get to that later. So some general rules for using resources, and I mean this very seriously. Number one, never just drop information. If you are writing any type of thing where you're pulling in outside information, don't just drop it in. Explain it, lead into it, give your audience some kind of context. It'd be the same thing if you were telling somebody something in person or giving a speech. You don't just randomly drop information and move on. No, you explain its relevance, you explain where it came from, you talk about it. Same applies for using a source in an essay. Don't just drop it. Bring the information in, explain where it comes from, give us the context. Why is it relevant? Why should anybody care about it? And in fact, even more important, well, I wouldn't say more important, but just as important, connect it to your work. If you are going to bring in somebody else's information, somebody else's expertise, you should be able to connect back to what it is you're talking about. There shouldn't be confusion. It should be oh, this is one-to-one. Okay, it makes sense. This is what this person expert said, and this is how I'm taking it to apply to my stuff. So then your reader goes, oh, I see how that works. It's important. Number 3 is what I tell all students to avoid plagiarism is give credit where credit is due. Anytime you pull in information from another source, give credit. At bare minimum, say who said it. Even if you do incorrect citation, you've at least given credit, and I would consider that not plagiarism, as long as you gave credit where credit is due. So this is something that I recommend on the outside, i.e. not necessarily within the paper, but something that you start to plan and figure out outside of the paper, is group sources by ideas. If you're trying to figure out the best way to utilize all the information you're gathering and researching, start grouping them by their main ideas. A good way to think about it is if you're writing an essay and you have 5 subtopics, group each subtopic into their own thing and put sources that connect each one in those. Yeah, you can double up on sources, but it's important to have those distinct groupings so then you know what makes sense. And this, I do mean especially in the writing aspect, is follow the rule of 1. 1 topic per source. Again, not that you can't use a source multiple ways in multiple areas, but you want to make sure that you're not overusing one topic or one source too much. And you also want to make sure that you're not, overwhelming a particular subject too much in your own writing. So try to keep it to about 1 topic per source, so that way you're using all of your sources equally. You obviously can double up, like I said, but this is a good rule to make them more robust. So, as I even said, a good way to integrate sources is to lead in or introduce the quote. Provide some background on the quote, on the information you're providing. Heck, even the author themselves, where do they come from? What importance does this have? And this one, I cannot believe I have to say this in 2025, but here it is. Explain the quote or the commentary. Too many times do I see students put in a quote and then move on. That is bad writing. Anytime that you bring in a quote from somebody else, anytime you bring somebody else's ideas, you need to explain it. And I don't mean going word for word and repeating what they said or trying to make it make sense. No, explain it. How is it relevant? And what does it say? What is it saying about the overall argument that they were originally making, and how does it apply to yours? You should never have quotes that are not explained in an essay. That's bad writing. And I would argue, and I still see this in professional writing, but it's not good, is ending on a quote. Don't end a paragraph on a quote. Don't end a section on a quote. because all quotes should be explained. So obviously, another way that you can integrate sources is summary. Explain what the quote said in simple terms. Heck, explain the source itself. And one of my favorite things that you can do to explain a quote is also to expand on a quote. Summarize the original source outside of the quote and say, okay, this quote was talking about this particular thing, but let's look at how it applies to this unique case. This is why I said you should never just end on a quote. There should always be more after the quote. All right. So here, I normally don't talk about this, but since, well, I've been working here at EC3 since we opened, since the second round of students who have taken English Comp 2 and have taken World History with Mr. Forrester, I have since made this a part of this argument, or part of this lecture about types of sources and integrating them, because I know Mr. Forrester's history class requires primary and secondary sources. So now I make sure that we talk about them here, so if you haven't had history yet, you've heard of these terms before. And if you have had history, you might have some PTSD about it, but at least you've heard of these terms. So primary sources are first-hand accounts. These are by the individual themselves. They can be things like surveys or interviews or, again, autobiographies. First-hand accounts of what happened. That's a primary source. If you witnessed a car accident happening in full real time, you are a primary source on what happened in the accident. A secondary source is someone who is connected to the primary. It's at least one level removed. Biographies, not autobiographies, but biographies, they are secondhand accounts written by somebody who knew the person or had done investigation into the primary person's life. So this would be, you witnessed a car accident and you told your best friend about everything that happened at the car accident. Anyone they tell, they are now a secondary source. They did not actually witness it. They are one level removed. And then technically there's more than tertiary, but it gets more complicated, so it's just easier to say tertiary, or the third level out, the second level removed, is everything else. So if it is not directly connected to the source, primary count, or one level removed, secondary source, it is counted as a tertiary, a third level source. Okay? For my purposes in this class, it doesn't matter what level of source you use. Level source you use. Of course, I will always encourage primary and secondary sources, but some topics you're going to have to use tertiary sources. So don't worry about it so much here in this class, but be aware that especially in history, you will have to get very specific level of information. So this slide's a little bit different because I put two terms, qualitative and quantitative. And the background is actually a little hint at what we're talking about because we're looking at data. We're talking about data. If you've not taken a psychology class or a sociology class, or you've never heard these terms before, well, you're learning them here. So there are many different types of studies and research. And I've said before, there's no right or wrong way to do research. And that's still true. But I do want to emphasize that the type of data that we acquire, we gain, can come from different types of tests. And that comes down to the data that we're looking for. Qualitative or quality data versus quantitative or quantity data. It's the easiest way to remember it. Qualitative data tends to be focused on small groups, very focused, in depth. We're looking for quality of information. We're looking for personal accounts. We're looking for people to do full interviews to tell me about every single detail related to it. Quantitative takes the opposite approach. It wants as much data as possible. So these are, whenever you hear about a study that interviewed 10,000 people, 2,000 people, 40,000 people, when you hear those big numbers, those are quantitative studies. What they're doing is trying to get a large sample of individuals to get a rough average of results. I want to emphasize both systems and styles are valid. Both give different types of information, but both are good types of information. I cannot emphasize enough, both are really good, but it does change what you are trying to get out of it. If you're trying to get the most information from each subject as possible, you go qualitative. But if you want the most data that can be applied to the largest number of people, you go quantitative. Again, both are valid. Both are good. This next statement is very specifically for anyone who's interested in doing a survey or interview as part of their research. For our purposes in this class, you do not have the time to do a full in-depth research study. It's just not possible. Students in the past have done mini ones where they talk to a small group of friends or family and use that data, and that's totally fine. That always ends up being qualitative because we're looking at numbers less than typically 20 to 30. Like, they tend to be smaller numbers. I encourage that if you want to do that, but it is not necessary. But it is important that you understand the difference. This is the comment for everybody. You should understand the difference between qualitative and quantitative research. All right. So, for the most part, this is a little tease towards the end of the project. Not here, but for our final project. Your essay layout is right here. Yeah, I'm not kidding. Introduction, background, body, conclusion. That's it. There'll be an entire mini part of a lecture on this alone. But I wanted to give it here now so you can start thinking about, as you're developing your annotated bibliography and you're coming up with your sources, you can start thinking about, well, what is my essay going to look like? Well, very much. You're going to need background, and you're going to have main points or assertions. You're going to need to be able to talk about those things. And that's where those sources come in. Oh, look at that. I couldn't remember if I had it in here. Don't end paragraphs on or sections of your work with quotes or other people's ideas. Always your own. It's just fun. Okay. So, now to talk about the two essays. Essay 77, Why Good People Turn Bad Online. So, real quickly, the essay itself, the relevancy is, it's important to note that this article came out during a time before Elon Musk bought Twitter and changed it to X. And so, what is our author's thesis and what call to action do they put forward? Well, if you read through it, you will understand very quickly that the author's thesis is also kind of half stated in the title of the article, Why Good People Turn Bad Online. And what we find in general is that there's a level of anonymity and separation from the human side of interactions that allows us to do things that we most times would never be caught dead doing in a real situation. And I would even go as far as to pose this to all of you. Have you ever said something really mean online in like a comment or a text or something that you never would have said in person? I'll admit I have. I know I have. And that's terrifying for me. And it is because, yeah, behind the screen, there's no one there. It's faceless. So I don't feel any guilt towards that. And that's the wrong attitude to take. And our call to action really is to consider the human side to it, that behind the screen of the person you're calling an idiot, a moron, a terrible slur, is a human. It's another person who thinks and feels, and the impact that has. And so this is a really good example of doing some research and finding out that, holy crap, this is more widespread than a lot of people tend to think about. And, well, what is the solution? And the solution seems easy, but how do we apply it? But very specifically, because we live in a post Elon Musk Twitter environment, I really think it's relevant for us to say now in a post Elon Musk Twitter acquisition, what relevancy does this article, research, and the results about anonymity and hate speech and whatnot have? Something to think about. Not necessarily a positive thing, but something to consider. And then there's Essay 80, America's Walking Renaissance. And so, what is this essay about? Who is the intended audience, and why is this relevant to us here in Erie County? And honestly, I'll tell you right now, the essay, it's all about the rise in public interest in walking and bicycling. And honestly, you can see this. You can actually watch the trend. It has been a national trend for a little bit. And the data provided shows benefits of exercise and the right to safely commute. And honestly, I don't think anyone wants to deny the health benefits. I do know for a fact I had a student just a couple semesters ago who even mentioned he bikes everywhere. Not that he doesn't have a car, he just prefers to bike. And he hates winter because it's the time that he typically can't bike. But, like, that's a legitimate thing. And that was here at EC3. So, like, that's something to consider. So, how walkable is Erie? How bikeable is it? And I will definitely say, since they've added a lot of the bike lanes, it has become more bikeable, but there's still issues. And of course, we have the Green Garden Boulevard bike lane project and the public backlash to it. If you aren't familiar and you don't live in the area, Green Garden Boulevard, when they were talking about building the public bike lanes, a lot of people on Green Garden Boulevard were really upset who lived there and, had a lot of negative things to say. And yet the project still happened, so just something to consider. And then the Bayfront Roadway Reconstruction Project, which is actually partially happening now. In this time right now, the Bayfront is being worked on as part of this, and there was public backlash yet again to this because it made it less walkable. So we're seeing it in real time. This is something that is happening all around us. This is happening here in the United States. This is happening here in Erie County. And I want to point out that it's important to note that the smallest insignificant seeming topic, like riding your bike, can have a larger impact and can be something that research could help. I mean, if you tried to explain to people who are very against the bike lane about the research into it, I think at least those who understand how to look at research and not be just angry, I think would understand and feel on the same level. That's the point. The point of research, as hopefully you're getting in these essays, is that it's not always these really dumb, boring, not dumb and boring because some people like it, because I enjoy some of the high science things, but it's not all high science and math and things like that. Sometimes it's whether or not people use the word love or not. It's cheesy aphorisms. It's walking and biking rather than driving everywhere. It's enjoying a lighthouse. Research can be so many things. It can be things that are serious and depressing, like dealing with people with depression and addiction and all of those things. And it can also be beautiful things. It can be about particular hobbies and the positivity and the impact that certain activities have on development. And it can be so many different things. I don't want you to think that you are stuck or trapped with a particular topic. There's more to it. You should be able to do more with it. So that ends the slideshow. But like I said, I want to talk about I want to talk about citations real quick. So bear with me. We're going to switch gears just a little bit. So in the week 3 folder, there is this document that says example MLA APA citations or something along those lines. And so for the most part, as I've said before, MLA and APA are pretty much the same formatting. The biggest difference is this is a totally subtle and really frustrating thing, but in APA you list up to 20 authors on a work. Anything more than 21, you include the first 19 and then an ellipses and then the last author, which is a whole thing. Don't worry about that. Most of the time, you're never going to have that issue. In MLA, it says after 3 authors, you put et al. We'll talk more specifically about that, but what is important is I gave some just simple, basic examples. These are all fictional. None of these are real. Before you start looking for these things, they're not real. I came up with these years ago when I was working at the casino with a couple different people, and I said, hey, would you mind if I used you as an example in my English class? And they're like, yeah, no problem. So, what I give you is a type of source and some information, and I show you how to put these in MLA style and APA style. So this first one is a book. Our author is John Koslow. Neo is the New God, Understanding the Inner Workings and Symbolism of the Matrix series, Norton Publisher, 2021. That's all the information you get. So, if you're in MLA, you would cite this as our author first, which is going back to that previous, remember we talked about this last week. Author, always last name first, comma, and then in MLA it's our first name, John. Boom. Now we have the title of our book. Neo is the New God, Understanding the Inner Working and Symbolism of the Matrix series. Period. Notice this is in italics. That's an important piece. Then we know that Norton Publisher, this is a little side detail, but if you look, Norton Publishing has several different locations. If you need to know its location, you pick the one that is closest to your geographic location. Us here in Pennsylvania, we are closest to the New York branch of Norton Publisher, so we would put New York, comma, Norton. And then the year was published, 2021. That's it. That's how we make one citation. Pretty straightforward. In APA, Koslow, comma, J, because in APA we don't use the first names, we use initials. And then we put the year up front rather than at the end. So the year. So I'll tell you right now, APA, this is the important piece because this is how we determine how relevant and how recent information is. We look for the year right after the author. So that's part of the reason why we have that there. Then we have Neo's the New God, Understanding the Inner Working Symbolism of the Matrix series. Notice, again, period, but we have some weird capitalization. That's a particular thing of APA. And then Norton. Pretty straightforward. Let me be the first one to tell you this. Yes, I am going over these examples, but you know what you can do? You can use a citation generator online. And I know you're thinking, wait, my teacher's telling me to use the citation generators? Yes. Work smarter, not harder. By all means, use citation generators to gather all the stuff you need for your source. That's the best thing you can do. Get those all done. Then go back through each citation and make sure it's correct. Citation generators aren't always correct. They get a lot of the basic information right. So if you put in this information for the book, if it really existed, guess what? Your citation generator would probably pop out either one of these two. It really would. It might not include the New York part of Norton because that wasn't part of this information, but it would still have all the other information, and that would be correct. Same with this example, which is a journal article. And I emphasize the journal article only because if you are using academic sources from a journal database, these get confusing, and so I want to make sure that you have the proper way to do this. Okay? I will also tell you, if you use the online academic journal database, there is a citation function, and their citations are actually accurate. You can copy and paste them. Yeah, it'll make the formatting look weird, but I'll know that you got them from there, and that's fine. So, here, my journal article. Sean Hayer is my author, Breaking Down the Myth of God, Exploring the Origins of God and Goddesses throughout history. That's the title of the article. It was posted in the Journal of Popular Culture in the December 2021 issue. That's when it came out. So we have volume 58, issue number 4, pages 420 to 435. This is why I'm telling you, citation generators will get a lot of information right, but not always everything. The online ones through the library, through the journal databases, I've checked recently and they're pretty good. This is the important part because things get confusing. Our author is there like normal. The year is like there in normal. Please note, title of the larger work is here. The Journal of Popular Culture is the big book that holds the article. So that means our article title is in quotation marks in MLA, and our big book is italics. In APA, there is no quotations, and we still italicize the big piece. Do you see this? This is an important distinction. Another is how we do the next part. After we have the journal, we need the volume, we need the publication information, the volume number, the issue number, and when it came out in the page numbers. So we have volume 58, number 4, 2021, and the page numbers. APA does it a lot quicker. Volume 58, in parentheses, our issue number, then our page numbers, and then our DOI, which is like a URL. That's it. We have an example of a website. This is not a real website. If you click on this, this doesn't go anywhere. It doesn't actually exist. But again, Colin Lazar, Laser's top 10 greatest movies of all time, and a URL, author, title, the hosting website, which is Blogspot, year, and the URL. And notice, we didn't have a year on this one, so we put no date in parentheses for APA. N.D, no date. News article, post in the Erie Reader. Boom, look at that. Author, title, publication, page numbers, done. Movie or show, director, title, location, title, director. See? This is why I said this is super easy. It's just, it's time consuming. It's tedious and time consuming. So please hear me when I say this. Take your time. Use a citation generator to get the basics of your citations done, and then go back through and just double check. Use the OWL Purdue, the MLA and APA site, which I'll show briefly where to find them in this video. But yeah. And then last, if you want to use a YouTube video, same kind of concept. What's the YouTube channel? When was it posted? What's the title? Etc. Boom. Done. So, let me show you the OWL Purdue. If you go under our course-specific content, there's the OWL Purdue MLA and APA. This is the OWL Purdue. If you click on MLA, look, there's an in-source or insight generator for your sources. Boom. But over here, in this column here, if you click on Formatting and Style Guide, look at this. In-text citations basics. So if you're not sure how to in-text cite something, there's a whole page that talks about how to do it. All the different exceptions and rules, all those things. This is really a good resource. It's why we encourage you to use it. Works cited pages basic formatting. Tells you, oh, hey, here's the capitalization rules. Here's how we do this. This is work by authors and their specifics like books, periodicals, web pages, common sources. If you cannot find the resources to tell you how to properly do it, reach out. Ask me specifically, give me the information of your source, and I will help you figure out the right way to do that. That's the MLA page. Guess what? APA page looks the exact same. Boom. Oh, look at this. Oh, we have in-text citations, the basics, and authors, and look at this. We have reference lists, and look, there's, again, a citation generator. This is why I said all the resources are available to you. It's up to you to use them. Okay? As well as the EC3 library. Boom, look at that. You can find articles on EBSCOhost, which, yeah, I got to sign in, and I don't have that signed in right now. Apologies on that one, but the login information is right here. Hint, hint. Yeah, you're seeing it in real time. See? So when you click on it, I'm showing you exactly how to do it. Enter username ECCC library. And then our password is this EC3PA exclamation mark 2024. And boom, you're into EBSCOhost. This is it. Use this to search up dinosaurs. Yeah, I got it. I've used this. Oh, look at this. Ebook. Peer-reviewed. Let me add some filters. Let me add only peer-reviewed things and full-text things. Oh, look at this. A new Middle Jurassic Lagoon margin assemblage of theropod and sauropod dinosaur trackways. Ooh, from Scotland. Okay, look at that. This sounds interesting. We got some information on it. Here's the abstract. Full-text word count. DOI. Everything that we need to know for it. We can download it. And I believe we can, yep, right here. The quotes, cite it. And look at this. Let's go to APA. And it did the work for us. Let's scroll down and go to MLA. It did the work for us. This is what I mean, people. Use what's available to you. Work smarter, not harder. That being said, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I know this was a little all over the place because we talked about a couple different things. But by all means, please, don't hesitate to ask if you're struggling to research. Research is a process. It's not something that happens in one simple moment. Dive in. Look for specific things. Look for things that you didn't consider trying. See where it leads you. And I look forward to not only looking at your annotated bibliographies, but reading your final research papers. Thank you very much. I'll see you in the next video.